In the shadowy corridors of Buckingham Palace, where centuries of secrets whisper through gilded walls, one man's unwavering loyalty would spark a scandal that would shake the very foundations of the British monarchy. Captain James Morrison had sworn an oath to protect the crown, but when faced with choosing between two queens, his decision would expose dark truths that the palace had desperately tried to bury. This is the story of a royal guard whose allegiance to Princess Catherine would challenge everything the world thought they knew about royal protocol, family loyalty, and the hidden power struggles within the House of Windsor. What started as a simple security assignment would become the most talked-about royal controversy in decades, proving that sometimes the greatest threats to the monarchy come not from outside enemies, but from within the palace walls themselves. The morning mist clung to the windows of Buckingham Palace as Captain James Morrison adjusted his ceremonial uniform for what he believed would be another routine day. The gold braiding on his red tunic caught the early sunlight streaming through the palace corridors, and his polished boots echoed against the marble floors with the precision that had made him one of the most respected members of the Queen's Guard. At 35, James had dedicated 15 years of his life to protecting the royal family, earning commendations for his unwavering professionalism and discreet handling of sensitive situations. James came from a military family that had served the crown for generations. His grandfather had protected King George VI during World War II, and his father had been part of Queen Elizabeth's personal security detail for over 2 decades. The Morrison family understood duty, honor, and the sacred trust that came with safeguarding the monarchy. James had grown up hearing stories of royal protocols, understanding that his role was not just about physical protection, but about maintaining the dignity and reputation of the institution itself. The assignment that would change everything began on a seemingly ordinary Tuesday in March. James received orders from his commanding officer, Colonel Whitmore, to provide additional security support for Queen Camilla during her upcoming charity engagements. This was standard procedure, nothing that should have raised any concerns. However, as James reviewed the briefing documents in his small office within the palace complex, he noticed something unusual about the scheduling and locations. Queen Camilla's itinerary included several private meetings that were not part of her official public calendar. The locations were high-end establishments in central London, and the guest lists included names that James recognized from recent tabloid controversies. His training had taught him to notice details that others might overlook, and these patterns seemed inconsistent with typical royal charity work. During his first day of the assignment, James accompanied Queen Camilla to what was officially described as a meeting with arts charity representatives at the Savoy Hotel. As they arrived at the elegant establishment, James positioned himself according to protocol, while Queen Camilla entered a private dining room. However, through careful observation, he noticed that the individuals she met with were not the charity representatives listed in the official documentation. Instead, Queen Camilla spent 2 hours in deep conversation with several prominent media executives and public relations specialists. James could not hear the specific details of their discussion, but he observed the exchange of documents and the serious nature of their conversation. His security training had made him adept at reading body language and recognizing when meetings involved more than their stated purpose. Over the following days, similar patterns emerged. Queen Camilla attended what were officially charity functions, but James observed meetings with political advisors, media strategists, and individuals whose connections to charitable work seemed questionable at best. His growing concerns were compounded by the fact that these activities were being deliberately concealed from other members of the royal household. The situation became more complex when James learned about parallel events involving Princess Catherine. While he was assigned to Queen Camilla, his colleagues in the security detail were reporting unusual activities surrounding the Princess of Wales. Catherine had been making her own series of private appointments, but unlike Queen Camilla's meetings, these appeared to be genuine charitable endeavors and family-related activities that had been scheduled around her official duties. James began to piece together what appeared to be a coordinated effort by Queen Camilla to manage public perception and media coverage in ways that might not align with the palace's official communication strategy. The meetings he had observed seemed designed to influence how certain royal family members were portrayed in the press, and these activities were being conducted without the knowledge of King Charles or other senior royals. The turning point came during a particularly revealing incident at a private club in Mayfair. James had accompanied Queen Camilla to what was supposed to be a small gathering for a children's literacy charity. However, upon arrival, he realized that the event was actually a strategic planning session focused on public relations campaigns. The discussion he partially overheard involved ways to redirect public attention away from Princess Catherine's increasingly popular charitable initiatives and toward Queen Camilla's own projects. What disturbed James most was overhearing references to specific strategies for undermining public confidence in Princess Catherine's role within the royal family. The conversation included discussions about planting negative stories in the media and creating situations that would make the Princess of Wales appear less competent or committed to her royal duties. This crossed a line that James had never imagined any member of the royal family would consider crossing. That evening, James found himself in an unprecedented ethical dilemma. His oath was to protect the crown and maintain the dignity of the monarchy, but he had witnessed behavior that seemed to threaten both of these principles. The activities he had observed appeared to be creating internal conflicts that could damage the institution he had sworn to protect. James spent sleepless nights considering his options. He could report his observations to Colonel Whitmore, but Queen Camilla's activities were not technically illegal, and questioning a senior royal's actions could end his career and bring disgrace to his family's long tradition of service. Alternatively, he could remain silent and continue to fulfill his duties while hoping that the situation would resolve itself naturally. However, James's moral compass pointed him toward a different course of action. His loyalty was ultimately to the crown as an institution rather than to any individual royal family member. If Queen Camilla's activities were potentially damaging to the monarchy's reputation and effectiveness, then his duty required him to find a way to address the situation appropriately. The complexity of his position became even more apparent when he began to observe how Queen Camilla's activities were affecting other members of the royal household. Staff members who worked closely with Princess Catherine were reporting unusual pressures and conflicting instructions that seemed designed to create inefficiencies and mistakes in the princess's official engagements. These subtle forms of sabotage were being implemented in ways that would be difficult to trace back to their source. James realized that his unique position as Queen Camilla's security detail gave him access to information that few others possessed. He was witnessing a deliberate campaign that could have serious consequences for the monarchy's future stability and public reputation. The weight of this knowledge created a burden that went far beyond his normal security responsibilities. As he prepared for another day of assignments with Queen Camilla, James made a decision that would change the course of his career and potentially impact the royal family forever. He would begin documenting the activities he observed, not with the intention of betraying his oath, but with the goal of protecting the institution he had dedicated his life to serving. The evidence he gathered would need to be substantial and undeniable if he was ever going to act upon it. The stage was set for a confrontation that would test every principle James had learned about duty, loyalty, and moral courage. His choice to prioritize the long-term welfare of the monarchy over short-term political considerations would soon put him at the center of a royal controversy that no amount of training could have prepared him to handle. The quiet corridors of Buckingham Palace were about to become the setting for a drama that would captivate the world's attention and force everyone to question where true loyalty should lie when the very institution you serve faces internal threats. The decision to document Queen Camilla's suspicious activities required James to develop skills he had never needed during his 15 years of royal service. His military training had prepared him for physical threats and security breaches, but gathering evidence of internal palace politics demanded a completely different approach. He began carrying a small digital recorder during assignments, carefully positioned to capture conversations without violating security protocols that prohibited recording devices in certain royal spaces. James's first major breakthrough came during a meeting at the Royal Opera House, where Queen Camilla was supposedly attending a preview for a cultural charity event. Instead, he discovered that the event was a cover for a gathering of influential media proprietors and senior editors from major British newspapers. The conversation he recorded revealed explicit discussions about coordinated negative coverage of Princess Catherine's upcoming solo royal tour of Australia and New Zealand. The media executives spoke openly about their willingness to publish unflattering photographs, emphasize any minor protocol mistakes, and create narratives that would portray Princess Catherine as unprepared for major international responsibilities. In exchange, Queen Camilla promised exclusive access to royal events and insider information that would give these publications competitive advantages over their rivals. James realized he was witnessing the orchestration of a media campaign designed to undermine public confidence in the Princess of Wales at a crucial moment in her royal career. What made the situation even more troubling was the revelation that these activities were being funded through discretionary accounts that Queen Camilla controlled independently of the official royal household budget. James discovered this during a subsequent meeting at a private banking institution in the City of London, where Queen Camilla discussed substantial payments to public relations firms and media consultants. The financial arrangements were structured to avoid scrutiny from the palace's official accounting procedures. As James continued his covert documentation, he began to understand the broader scope of Queen Camilla's campaign. The strategy extended beyond simple media manipulation to include interference with Princess Catherine's charitable work and official engagements. James observed meetings where Queen Camilla coordinated with certain charity organizations to create scheduling conflicts that would force the Princess of Wales to cancel or reschedule important appearances. These tactics were particularly evident during preparations for a major children's mental health initiative that Princess Catherine had been developing for over 2 years. James discovered that Queen Camilla had been working behind the scenes to convince key corporate sponsors to withdraw their support, citing concerns about the initiative's potential effectiveness. The goal appeared to be forcing the cancellation of the program, which would have been a significant embarrassment for Princess Catherine and could have damaged her credibility in the mental health advocacy space. The emotional toll of witnessing these activities while maintaining his professional composure began to affect James significantly. He found himself questioning not only Queen Camilla's actions, but also the entire system that allowed such behavior to occur without oversight. His respect for the monarchy as an institution remained strong, but he struggled with the realization that some individuals within the royal family were willing to prioritize personal interests over the collective good of the crown. James's internal conflict deepened when he began to observe the impact of Queen Camilla's campaign on Princess Catherine herself. During joint royal engagements where both women were present, James could see the strain on the Princess of Wales. She maintained her public composure with remarkable grace, but James noticed subtle signs of stress and confusion as she dealt with unexplained obstacles and negative media coverage that seemed to emerge from nowhere. The situation reached a critical point during a Commonwealth Day reception at Westminster Abbey. James was providing security support for the event when he overheard a conversation between Queen Camilla and a prominent political advisor about plans to create a major public controversy that would overshadow Princess Catherine's role in the upcoming coronation anniversary celebrations. The details of their discussion suggested coordinated leaks to the press that would resurrect old controversies and create new questions about the princess's suitability for her future role as queen consort. That evening, James made a decision that would fundamentally alter his relationship with the royal family. He reached out to Sarah Mitchell, Princess Catherine's private secretary, requesting a private meeting to discuss security concerns. Sarah was initially surprised by the unusual request, as security matters were typically handled through official channels, but James's reputation for professionalism and discretion convinced her to agree to the meeting. The meeting took place in a quiet cafe near Hyde Park, far from the palace and its network of formal protocols. James carefully explained his observations to Sarah, providing selected excerpts from his recordings to demonstrate the seriousness of the situation. Sarah's reaction progressed from skepticism to shock as she realized the scope and coordination of the activities James had documented. Sarah immediately understood the implications of James's revelations. The evidence suggested a systematic campaign that went far beyond normal royal family rivalries or competition for public attention. If the activities James had observed became public knowledge, they could create a scandal that would damage the monarchy's reputation for decades. More immediately, they posed direct threats to Princess Catherine's well-being and her ability to fulfill her royal duties effectively. The challenge facing both James and Sarah was determining how to address the situation appropriately. Direct confrontation with Queen Camilla could escalate the conflict and potentially create even more damage to the royal family's public image. However, allowing the campaign to continue unchallenged could result in serious harm to Princess Catherine and potentially compromise the monarchy's future stability. Sarah proposed involving Princess Catherine directly in discussions about how to respond to the situation. James was initially hesitant about this approach, as it would require him to essentially betray his current assignment and potentially face serious professional consequences. However, he recognized that his primary duty was to protect the institution of the monarchy, and this objective might require short-term sacrifices of his personal career interests. The meeting with Princess Catherine was arranged for the following week at Kensington Palace, in a private sitting room that was regularly swept for electronic surveillance devices. James had never spoken directly with Princess Catherine beyond formal security briefings, and he was struck by her composure and thoughtfulness as he presented his evidence. Rather than reacting with anger or distress, she asked detailed questions about the timeline of events and the specific individuals involved in Queen Camilla's activities. Princess Catherine's response demonstrated the political intelligence that had made her such an effective member of the royal family. She immediately understood that the situation required careful management to avoid escalating the conflict or creating public controversies that would damage the monarchy as a whole. Her primary concern was not personal vindication, but finding ways to protect the institution while addressing the immediate threats to her work and reputation. After reviewing James's documentation, Princess Catherine proposed a strategy that would address Queen Camilla's campaign without creating a public scandal. The approach involved quietly neutralizing the most damaging aspects of the campaign, while documenting everything for potential future use if the situation escalated further. James would continue his current assignment while secretly reporting to Princess Catherine's team about Queen Camilla's ongoing activities. The ethical complexity of this arrangement was not lost on James. He was essentially agreeing to spy on one member of the royal family on behalf of another, which violated fundamental principles of his security training. However, his analysis of the situation convinced him that Queen Camilla's activities posed greater threats to the monarchy than the security breach represented by his covert reporting arrangement. As James prepared to return to his regular duties with Queen Camilla, he understood that he had crossed a threshold from which there might be no return. His decision to prioritize institutional loyalty over personal safety had committed him to a course of action that could end his career and potentially expose him to legal consequences. The weight of this choice was balanced by his conviction that protecting Princess Catherine was ultimately protecting the future of the crown itself. The stage was now set for a more sophisticated form of palace intrigue than James had ever imagined possible. His role had evolved from simple security provision to active intelligence gathering, and he would need to maintain his professional facade with Queen Camilla while secretly working to protect Princess Catherine from ongoing threats. The next phase of this royal drama would test his abilities in ways that no amount of military training could have prepared him to handle. Operating as a double agent within the royal household required James to master an entirely different set of skills than those he had developed during his military career. Every interaction with Queen Camilla now carried multiple layers of meaning, as he had to maintain his professional demeanor while secretly gathering intelligence about her ongoing campaign against Princess Catherine. The psychological pressure of this dual existence began to manifest in ways that threatened to compromise his effectiveness in both roles. James's new arrangement with Princess Catherine's team involved regular covert communications through Sarah Mitchell, who had established a secure channel for information exchange that avoided the palace's normal communication networks. These briefings typically occurred during James's off-duty hours at locations throughout London that provided privacy while maintaining plausible deniability if their meetings were discovered. The intelligence James provided proved invaluable in helping Princess Catherine's team anticipate and counter Queen Camilla's various initiatives. When Queen Camilla attempted to schedule conflicting events that would force Princess Catherine to cancel important engagements, Sarah was able to proactively adjust the princess's calendar to avoid these traps. Similarly, when negative media stories were being planted, Princess Catherine's communications team could prepare counter-narratives and positive coverage that minimized the damage. However, James soon discovered that Queen Camilla was becoming aware that her efforts were being systematically thwarted. During a particularly tense meeting with her media consultants at the Dorchester Hotel, Queen Camilla expressed frustration that several of her carefully planned initiatives had failed to achieve their intended impact. James observed her growing suspicion that someone within her circle was providing information to Princess Catherine's team. This development forced James to become even more careful about his information-gathering activities. Queen Camilla began varying her schedules unpredictably, and holding some meetings in locations that were not part of her official itinerary. She also started using coded language during sensitive conversations, and limiting the number of people who had access to complete information about her plans. These countermeasures made James's work significantly more challenging and dangerous. The stakes of the conflict escalated dramatically when James discovered that Queen Camilla was planning what he could only describe as a coordinated attack on Princess Catherine's reputation, timed to coincide with the princess's solo royal tour of Australia and New Zealand. The plan involved multiple simultaneous initiatives designed to create a crisis of confidence in Princess Catherine's abilities and judgment that would overshadow her diplomatic successes. The first component of this attack involved the strategic release of carefully edited photographs from previous royal engagements that could be presented out of context to suggest inappropriate behavior or poor judgment. James learned about this during a meeting between Queen Camilla and a freelance photographer who specialized in paparazzi-style images. The photographer had been systematically collecting unflattering or ambiguous photos of Princess Catherine over several months, and Queen Camilla was coordinating their release through various media outlets. The second element involved manufactured controversies about Princess Catherine's charitable work. Queen Camilla had been working with former employees of various charities to develop accusations about mismanagement of funds and inappropriate use of royal influence. These accusations were designed to be difficult to disprove quickly, and would require Princess Catherine to spend valuable time and energy addressing them, instead of focusing on her diplomatic mission. The third and most damaging component involved allegations about Princess Catherine's relationship with her staff and other members of the royal family. Queen Camilla had been collecting gossip and complaints from palace employees, some of whom had been incentivized to provide negative information through various forms of compensation. These stories were being woven into narratives that would portray Princess Catherine as difficult to work with and unsuited for her growing responsibilities within the monarchy. James realized that if this coordinated attack proceeded as planned, it could cause irreparable damage to Princess Catherine's reputation and potentially compromise her future effectiveness as a member of the royal family. The timing was particularly insidious, as Princess Catherine would be unable to respond effectively while representing the crown on the other side of the world. The urgency of the situation forced James to take increasingly risky steps to gather detailed information about Queen Camilla's plans. During a crucial planning meeting at Queen Camilla's private residence, James managed to access documents that outlined the complete timeline and coordination of the attack. However, his activities were nearly discovered when Queen Camilla unexpectedly returned to retrieve additional papers from her study. The close call convinced James that his cover might be compromised and that he needed to accelerate his intelligence gathering before Queen Camilla's suspicions led to his exposure. He began working with Sarah Mitchell to develop contingency plans for what would happen if his role was discovered before they could fully counter Queen Camilla's initiatives. Princess Catherine's response to learning about the scope of Queen Camilla's planned attack demonstrated remarkable strategic thinking under pressure. Rather than simply defending against each individual element of the attack, she proposed a proactive approach that would expose the coordinated nature of the campaign and potentially discredit its source. This strategy required careful timing and substantial evidence that could definitively link the various attacks back to Queen Camilla's team. The plan Princess Catherine developed involved allowing some of the less damaging attacks to proceed while documenting their coordination and timing in ways that would reveal the underlying campaign. James's recordings and photographs would provide crucial evidence, but additional corroboration would be needed to make the case compelling to both the palace hierarchy and the public if the conflict became open. James found himself at the center of an elaborate counterintelligence operation that required him to continue gathering evidence while helping to set traps that would expose Queen Camilla's activities. This involved allowing certain meetings to proceed while ensuring that their contents were recorded, and enabling specific communications while documenting their origins and destinations. The psychological toll of maintaining this complex deception began to affect James in ways he had not anticipated. The constant vigilance required to avoid exposure while gathering intelligence created chronic stress that manifested in insomnia, anxiety, and difficulty maintaining his normally impeccable professional standards during routine duties. His colleagues began to notice changes in his behavior, though none suspected the true cause of his distress. The situation became even more complicated when James learned that Queen Camilla had decided to accelerate her timeline in response to her growing suspicions about information leaks. Instead of waiting for Princess Catherine's departure for Australia, Queen Camilla planned to launch the first wave of attacks within days. This development forced James and Sarah Mitchell to abandon their careful preparations and implement emergency countermeasures that carried significantly higher risks of exposure. The emergency response involved Princess Catherine making direct contact with key media outlets to provide them with exclusive access to positive stories that would counter the negative narratives Queen Camilla was preparing to release. This approach required Princess Catherine to reveal some of her knowledge about the planned attacks without directly accusing Queen Camilla of orchestrating them. James's role in this accelerated timeline involved providing real-time intelligence about Queen Camilla's activities while maintaining his cover long enough for Princess Catherine's countermeasures to take effect. The success of this strategy depended on precise timing and coordination that left no margin for error. As the conflict approached its climax, James understood that his career in royal service was likely nearing its end regardless of the outcome. His decision to prioritize institutional loyalty over personal safety had committed him to a course of action that would inevitably come to light. However, his conviction that protecting Princess Catherine was essential for the monarchy's future gave him the resolve to see the operation through to its conclusion. The final confrontation between the competing factions within the royal family was about to unfold in ways that would test everyone's commitment to their stated principles and reveal the true nature of loyalty within the House of Windsor. James had positioned himself at the epicenter of this conflict, and his actions in the coming days would determine not only his own future, but potentially the direction of the monarchy itself. The morning that would determine James's fate began with Queen Camilla's final planning meeting for her coordinated attack on Princess Catherine's reputation. James arrived at the private dining room in Clarence House, knowing that this would likely be his last opportunity to gather intelligence before the campaign launched. The atmosphere in the room was charged with anticipation, as Queen Camilla's team prepared to execute what they believed would be a decisive blow against the Princess of Wales. James positioned himself according to standard security protocol while Queen Camilla reviewed the timeline with her media consultants and public relations advisors. The first wave of negative stories was scheduled to break in the afternoon papers, followed by a cascade of additional revelations that would dominate the news cycle for the remainder of the week. The coordination was impressive in its thoroughness and devastating in its potential impact on Princess Catherine's reputation. However, as the meeting progressed, James began to notice signs that Queen Camilla's team was becoming aware of potential problems with their plan. Several of the media outlets they had been working with had suddenly become unresponsive to their communications, and key sources for some of their planned stories had withdrawn their cooperation without explanation. Queen Camilla's growing agitation was evident, as she demanded explanations from her advisors about these unexpected developments. What Queen Camilla's team did not know was that Princess Catherine's counter-strategy had already begun to take effect. The previous evening, Sarah Mitchell had coordinated the release of positive stories about Princess Catherine's charitable work and royal duties to the same media outlets that Queen Camilla had been planning to use for her attack. These stories, supported by exclusive access and interviews that Queen Camilla could not match, had convinced several publications to abandon their planned negative coverage. James watched with fascination and growing anxiety as Queen Camilla realized that her carefully planned campaign was falling apart. Her response was to demand immediate activation of backup plans that would escalate the conflict beyond anything James had previously witnessed. She ordered her team to release the most damaging allegations immediately, regardless of verification or potential legal consequences. This decision created an opportunity that Princess Catherine's team had been preparing for throughout their counterintelligence operation. James activated a pre-positioned recording device that captured Queen Camilla explicitly ordering the release of information she knew to be fabricated or misleading. This evidence would prove crucial in demonstrating that the attacks on Princess Catherine were not based on legitimate concerns, but were part of a deliberate campaign of character assassination. As Queen Camilla's team scrambled to implement their emergency protocols, James excused himself from the room under the pretense of conducting a security check. Once outside, he immediately contacted Sarah Mitchell to report that Queen Camilla was accelerating her timeline and that Princess Catherine needed to implement the final phase of her defensive strategy immediately. The next several hours unfolded like a carefully choreographed battle between competing forces within the royal establishment. Queen Camilla's team succeeded in placing several negative stories about Princess Catherine in afternoon publications. But these stories were immediately challenged by contradictory evidence that Princess Catherine's team had prepared in advance. The conflicting narratives created confusion in the media, rather than the clear negative coverage that Queen Camilla had intended to achieve. James found himself in the extraordinary position of providing real-time intelligence about Queen Camilla's reactions and strategy adjustments to Princess Catherine's team, while maintaining his professional duties as her security detail. The psychological pressure of this dual role reached its peak when Queen Camilla began to suspect that someone in her immediate circle was providing information to her opponents. The confrontation James had been dreading finally occurred late in the afternoon when Queen Camilla directly questioned him about his observations during recent meetings. Her questions were carefully phrased to avoid direct accusations, but James understood that his cover was essentially blown. His responses had to be precise enough to avoid obvious lies, while maintaining enough ambiguity to preserve his position for a few more crucial hours. Queen Camilla's suspicions were confirmed when one of her media consultants reported that Princess Catherine's team had demonstrated knowledge of specific details from their morning meeting that could only have come from someone who was physically present in the room. The process of elimination quickly focused attention on James as the most likely source of the leak. The moment of truth arrived when Queen Camilla confronted James directly in the privacy of her study at Clarence House. She accused him of betraying his oath and demanded explanations for his apparent disloyalty. James realized that his undercover role was over, and that he had to decide whether to continue denying the accusations or to explain his actions honestly. James chose honesty, believing that his best defense was to frame his actions in terms of institutional loyalty rather than personal betrayal. He explained to Queen Camilla that his oath was to protect the crown and that he believed her campaign against Princess Catherine posed threats to the monarchy's stability and reputation that exceeded any personal considerations. He acknowledged providing information to Princess Catherine's team, but characterized this as fulfilling his duty to protect the institution rather than betraying his current assignment. Queen Camilla's reaction was a mixture of rage and grudging respect for James's principled position. She understood that his actions, while personally damaging to her interests, were motivated by genuine concern for the monarchy rather than personal animosity or ambition. However, she made it clear that his decision had consequences that would extend far beyond his current assignment. The immediate result of this confrontation was James's removal from Queen Camilla's security detail and his temporary suspension pending a formal investigation into his conduct. However, the broader implications of the conflict between Queen Camilla and Princess Catherine had already begun to reshape power dynamics within the royal household in ways that no one had fully anticipated. King Charles, who had been carefully kept uninformed about the conflict to avoid forcing him to choose sides between his wife and his daughter-in-law, finally learned about the situation when the media stories began to appear. His response was swift and decisive, demanding full briefings from both camps and making it clear that the internal warfare had to end immediately. The investigation into James's conduct became secondary to the larger question of how to resolve the underlying conflict without damaging the monarchy's public reputation. Princess Catherine's evidence of Queen Camilla's campaign, supported by James's recordings and documentation, made it impossible to dismiss the situation as a simple misunderstanding or personal rivalry. The resolution that emerged from high-level discussions within the royal household reflected a compromise that satisfied no one completely, but avoided the public scandal that everyone feared. Queen Camilla agreed to discontinue her media campaign and to coordinate her future activities with Princess Catherine's team to avoid conflicts. In exchange, Princess Catherine agreed not to pursue formal complaints about the attacks on her reputation and to maintain public harmony between the two households. James's fate was determined by King Charles personally, who recognized that the guard's actions, while technically insubordinate, had ultimately served the monarchy's best interests. Rather than facing court-martial or dismissal, James was quietly transferred to a different assignment within the Royal Protection Unit, with his record reflecting commendable service rather than disciplinary action. The transfer involved a promotion to a senior position responsible for coordinating security for multiple members of the royal family, a role that would prevent future conflicts of loyalty while utilizing James's demonstrated skills in complex political situations. Princess Catherine personally requested that James be considered for this position, recognizing that his integrity and institutional loyalty made him valuable, despite the unconventional nature of his recent service. The broader consequences of the conflict extended far beyond James's individual situation. The revelation of internal tensions between senior royal family members forced a comprehensive review of communication protocols and decision-making processes within the palace. New procedures were implemented to prevent future campaigns of the type that Queen Camilla had orchestrated, and to ensure that conflicts between royal households could be resolved before escalating to damaging levels. Princess Catherine emerged from the conflict with enhanced credibility and influence within the royal establishment. Her handling of Queen Camilla's attacks demonstrated political sophistication and strategic thinking that impressed senior palace officials and positioned her as a formidable force in future royal family dynamics. Her successful defense also strengthened her relationship with King Charles, who appreciated her commitment to institutional stability over personal vindication. Queen Camilla's position within the royal family remained secure, but her influence over media relations and public relations strategy was significantly curtailed. The evidence of her campaign against Princess Catherine created lasting skepticism about her motivations and judgment among palace staff and senior advisors who had previously supported her initiatives. The final chapter of James's story reflected the complex nature of loyalty within institutions where personal relationships intersect with public responsibilities. His decision to prioritize institutional welfare over immediate personal safety had been vindicated by events, but the experience had fundamentally changed his understanding of royal service and the challenges facing the monarchy in the modern era. Years later, as James continued his service in senior security positions, he reflected on the period when his choice between competing loyalties had tested every principle he had learned about duty and honor. The conflict had revealed that protecting the crown sometimes required difficult decisions about which members of the royal family deserved support and which posed threats to the institution's welfare. The story of Captain James Morrison became a quiet legend within the Royal Protection Service, illustrating the importance of moral courage in situations where formal protocols provided inadequate guidance. His example influenced training programs and ethical guidelines for future security personnel, ensuring that the lessons learned from his experience would benefit the monarchy for generations to come. The ultimate measure of James's success was the continued strength and stability of the royal family following the resolution of the conflict he had helped to expose and resolve. His allegiance to Princess Catherine had proven to be allegiance to the crown's future, validating his conviction that sometimes the greatest loyalty required the courage to challenge authority in service of higher principles.